Since the fall of man, a war has raged between good and evil. Over the centuries, this war has distorted the truth. Now the truth is perceived as lies, and lies acknowledged as truth. To this day, the battle continues as we investigate and debate the truth behind the history and mystery of the universe. We are Paratruth Radio. Ghost stories are fun to share, but they're even spookier around a campfire. Of course, the only thing that can make them even more terrifying is when the stories are true.
Now Paratruth presents Around the Campfire with special guest Jim Harold.
What's up, folks? Welcome to a brand new episode of Paratruth Radio on the Paratruth Radio Network. My name is Eric.
And I'm Justin.
And we have another brand new show for you this evening. I hope you guys are ready and looking forward to it. It's been an entire week since the last episode. There's been a few people that I know who've been downloading the iHeart app and listening to our show via iHeart, which is pretty cool. More people are starting to find us and tune in and check out all the most recent shows and all the past shows as well. Pretty cool thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well,
got to get that stretch in to get ready.
always have to get the stretch in before bringing ghosts on. Before bringing.
If we're bringing ghosts on, then this is a completely different show.
Oh, man. You know what? It's all right. Let's see here. I'm going to move that up. Sorry, my camera's off a little bit. It's bothering me. Okay. So, folks, we're going to just kind of jump into it. It's a busy week this week for me, and I'm running on 1 hour of sleep right now. So we're going to go ahead and jump into this, if that's all right with you, Justin.
Yep, sounds good.
All right. Today we have on a very special guest. His name is Jim Harold, and he wrote the book called True Ghost Stories, Jim Harold's Campfire Volume 5. Now, there are 5 volumes to this particular book, and I'm sure he'll bring it up sometime during the show, but in order to read them, you actually don't have to read them in sequential order. They don't follow each other, so they're standalone books. So you can pick them up anywhere, any volume, and you'll be good to go. But obviously, don't pick them up until you listen to the show here tonight, because you're going to want to hear more about the story. You know, we don't want to push you guys to, go buy something and then not like it. Not that you won't like this. I think you guys will like it. I read a few stories already, and I think what's really cool about these stories, like growing up, I've read a lot of ghost stories. Goosebumps, is one of the most popular of fictional books.
Yeah.
But this one is all based on true stories, or these volumes. So it's really cool. I read a couple of them. They're a little creepy. Some of them are fun, but nonetheless, we're going to go ahead and jump straight to the line with Jim Harold. Hey, Jim, welcome to Paratruth Radio. It's good to have you aboard.
Thank you, guys. So good to be here. I really enjoy being on different shows. So when I got the invite, I'm like, absolutely. So thank you so much.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. No, it's great to meet new people who have common interest. I mean, there's so much interest around this subject, and I think it's always great to have new people coming in and podcasting and talking about it and sharing ideas and maybe coming up with some new ones about what's behind all this stuff.
Oh, yeah. Completely agree with that. Now, what I want to do real quick before we actually jump into the book here is I want to give you a moment, Jim, to tell everybody a little bit about yourself, what your background is, and just the different style of books that you've been writing.
Sure. I am first and foremost a paranormal podcaster. I've been paranormal podcasting since 2005. Started off with a show called The Paranormal Podcast where I interview authors and experts and that kind of thing, and that's been going ever since then, so we're on our 11th year, I guess. And then in 2009, I started another podcast, another free podcast called Jim Harold's Campfire, and that's basically what sounds like. People call in from all around the world and they share their true stories of the supernatural. I also do a bunch of paid shows, but I won't get into those because, to be honest, I want people to just check out the free stuff and see if they like that, and there's plenty to listen to over at jimharold.com. And then as an offshoot of my Campfire show, in 2011, I started writing books, basically compilations of the best stories, and so far we've done 5 of them. Each book has about 70 true stories, or stories that people have presented as true on the programs, and a lot of ghost stories. But we also have things like shadow people and cryptids and UFOs and Ouija boards and head scratchers. So it's a nice mix, and it's a lot of fun. And just came out with the 5th book, True Ghost Stories, Jim Harold's Campfire 5, and that's available now, and it's doing pretty well.
Awesome. So, doing research for the book, did you get these stories from the Campfire podcast? Did you do more research into other stories? How did you come across these different?
No, these are all from the Campfire podcast. And what I kind of focus on, if anybody's ever listened to the Campfire podcast, we don't try to make it spookier by adding music or trying to get people to change their stories. It's just basically, I kind of just say, what happened to you? And I kind of sit back. Now, occasionally I'll interject a question here and there, but I try not to influence, and the books have the same spirit. You know, basically, these are the stories as told on the shows. Of course, we transcribe the stories and we edit them a little bit to make them flow, but we don't add or subtract any facts. The facts are the facts, and that's what we share with folks. So these are directly from the show. Now, people will say, yeah, do you research these to verify that they're true? And when I say true ghost stories, these are stories that people have presented as true on the programs. Now, I don't independently investigate them, so I couldn't swear 100% that they're true, but I will say this, is that I do try to focus on the stories that I think are the most interesting, but also the ones where the tellers seemed very sincere. And I will say this, I believe in the vast majority of cases, people are sincere. They believe the stories are true. They tell me the stories. Now, are they all something supernatural? Might there be some explanations in some cases that are not supernatural? Of course. But there are some stories that are kind of like, this has got to be supernatural. If it's true, it's got to be supernatural because there is no logical explanation. So That's kind of what I do and what the books are all about.
Cool. Now, I've got a question in regards to publishing these stories. Now, obviously, these people come on to your show and they tell you their stories. Now, when you go to publish them, do you actually have to contact the person who had told you the story and ask them, or do you just kind of go ahead and do it? Because I notice, the name, you don't have full names here. You're going by first name basis in these stories. So
now we actually make it very clear. The way the mechanics of it work is there's a sign up sheet, and I have certain times of the week that I take calls. So people have to sign up first, and on that sheet it basically says, if you come on the show and you agree to it and you check this box, your story may be used in a book or other derivations, because we want to be really upfront with people. We don't want a situation where somebody's story ends up in a book and they're like, I never agreed to that. We just kind of say, if you're on the show, you basically, to get on the show, you have to agree to that, just because we don't want to have any misunderstanding, and we want to be very transparent with people. And if somebody doesn't want that, that's totally fine. They don't need to be on the show, and I totally understand where they're coming from. But universally, because, for example, one thing I do is after we have people on the show, I email everybody who's in the book and say, hey, I'd like to send you a free copy of the book. And I've never had one person complain. Everybody's like, I'm in the book. I'm on the book. It's cool. So, I think that's because, up front that expectation is set. And I think people are good about things like that if they know going in what the deal is.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I commend you for doing that, because there are some pretty shady people out there that will put people in books without even asking their permission. So it's kind
Would not do that. Would
Right.
not do that.
Just from listening to your show, I've come to learn that you're a little more commendable than some people are. So,
Well, thank you. I tried to.
yeah. So, what kind of got you started with the paranormal podcast? I mean, obviously interest in the paranormal, but was there something that set you in interest in the paranormal? Because, I mean, we have our own story that actually got us started, so it's interesting to hear other people's stories.
Well, kind of the confluence of it was a couple of different things, but there were a couple great family ghost stories that I grew up with. One was actually a UFO story, one was a ghost story, and they were great. My dad was at the center of both of those, so I'd heard these. And my dad, now, you had mentioned you guys are from Cleveland. You know, Cleveland used to be a big steel town.
Right,
and my dad was a steel worker, so he wasn't like somebody trying to figure out his chakras or, sleeping with a pyramid under his bed. Pretty salt of the earth, straight ahead guy. And he had a couple of stories he swore to, and there were other family members with him who swore to them as well. So I think that somehow got me into it. Then I grew up as a little kid, in elementary school and things in the 70s, and In Search Of with Leonard Nimoy.
Oh,
I love that show. In fact, I'm looking right here. I've got the DVD box set of the whole series. It's fantastic. And it's kind of campy, you look back, but still some good information. And actually what's cool is I look at that set now and I'll see like, oh, I've interviewed him and I've interviewed her and I've interviewed him, even though it's a long time ago, but we've had an opportunity to interview some of these folks. So really quite fascinating. It's been quite fascinating. And so anyway, fast forward to 2005, and I mentioned to you guys off air, I was kind of a frustrated broadcaster. I'd gone to school to be on air, and it just didn't happen. It didn't because I started working in radio, but I worked on the business side. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden I look up after, 12, 13 years. I've got a wife, 2 kids, a mortgage, the whole thing. It's like, I don't think I'm going to be quitting all this to go to a TV job in Montana. Right. But I still felt that I had something to offer on the broadcasting side, and I said, well, I'll start a podcast. And I started thinking, well, what in the world am I going to start a podcast about? And I'm like, well, what are things I'm really interested in? Well, sports, I can't add anything there. Music, you can't do because of rights issues. Politics, right. Everybody's done it to death. You know what I would like to hear? A really good podcast on the paranormal. And I looked around, and I mean, I don't think there were some people podcasting on the internet. I don't think any of those people are still around. And there wasn't any like real high quality shows at the time that I can recall. And I'm like, well, I think a good, solid, straight-ahead interview show about these subjects would be a lot of fun to do. Maybe 3 people listen to it, but it would be a lot of fun to do. So I started doing it, and it's funny because, and this kind of speaks to like life, and this even gets into like the metaphysical, how things maybe happen for a reason. I had done the show on and off for about 3 years, and it, I was very busy, and I'd gotten like a middle management job, and anyway, so I got fired from that job. First and only time I ever got fired. Not because I did anything wrong, but I think some folks had some unrealistic expectations. But nevertheless, it happens to most people these days. And it kind of changed me. I went and got another job with a big 3-letter network, and I was working on the digital side for them. And I thought, that's going to be my big job. And a few months into it, I'm like, this is a good job, but it's not the job. This is not what I'm meant to do, and it's just another corporation and so forth and so on. I was sitting at my daughter's T-ball game, and I was listening to Dan Carlin, who's a great podcaster. He does a history podcast, and he's fantastic. And he had sponsors and all of this stuff. And I'm like, and I kind of been stumbling around with the paranormal podcast, doing a show, not putting a show out for 3 months. And I'm like, wait a minute. Okay, I'm beating my head against the wall at my job, my new job, and I can see it's going to be more of the same. And people are begging me for new episodes of this show. Why don't I really attack it and get with it? Since then, I've barely missed a week, of one podcast or another since 2008, and started dedicating myself to it. And people have just been great. They listen, and that's a little bit of my story. But the truth is that the interest in the paranormal was real. It wasn't just, this is a hot thing. That had nothing to do with it, because it wasn't as hot as it is now. And it was just something I was really interested in, but I didn't, I'm not a huge fan of the ghost TV shows, not a huge fan. I mean, some of them are okay, and certainly I interview people from them, but a little of the sensationalist aspect. I want more serious discussion, and I said, maybe nobody will listen to it, but at least I'll learn something, and it worked out.
I think that's kind of how we got started with it, too. I mean, we had, for like a year or two after my divorce, I came back up to Ohio, and Eric and I would sit and have a beer, and we'd talk vampires, werewolves, and I'm like, dude, we should do a show about this.
Absolutely.
We should be doing something about this. And, when we first started, same thing. We had maybe 2 or 3 listeners, but we were just starting. We were doing research, learning new things, and later on, him and I split up for a little while, doing our own separate shows, and came back together with Paratruth Radio, and it's been a heck of a ride so far, 2 years doing Paratruth Radio, but we started in 2009, and it's amazing how big paranormal has still become since then.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, it was funny because when I started, there used to be this thing you guys will probably remember. It was called Podcast Alley. And it was like before the iTunes directory and everything, and that was like the one place where you could go and find podcasts. I think there were about 15 or 20 paranormal podcasts. Again, I don't think they were tremendous quality. This is back in 2005. But I'm like, oh my gosh, how am I going to compete against 20 shows? Now there's more like 20,000 shows.
Right.
But today, my shows were on the front page of iTunes, the total front page of the podcast section. So I think we're holding our own, and the shows continue to grow. I just found out, I was listening to some stats, and turns out the shows are apparently in the top 2% of all podcasts in terms of downloads. So that's pretty exciting. So I think people are listening, and I'm going to keep pushing and hope that we can grow the audience even more.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, here's something that is kind of bugging me. So it's awesome that some of these stories here in this book are true. The one thing that's a little disappointing is that some of these stories don't have any closure to them. They just kind of
there's a reason for that. There's a reason for that. Because it's real. It's real life. It's not.
It's real life. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this and then finish. But my point is this: is that we don't gin up the stories, and we don't add things to them to make them more cinema-like. And I think life, if you look at it, I mean, I know in my life I have a lot of loose ends. Things that I didn't get closure. Maybe it was like a girlfriend in high school.
Right.
Whatever it might be. And I think it reflects real life. And I also think that because some of the stories are subtle, some of them are super dramatic, but some of them are very subtle. And I think that's kind of the way the paranormal really is in real life. I don't think it's always like a full body apparition, like walking up to you and like hitting you in the head with a hammer. Sometimes it's a song on the radio. Other times, you'll see a black-eyed girl knocking on your door. Right. I think it can be dramatic, but isn't always. But I'm sorry to interrupt you. I just wanted to kind of get that out there.
Oh, no, you're fine. I mean, I think it's great. I think it's awesome that, you're being real to the actual story. You're not transcending it in some way. But do you ever listen to some of your listeners who are calling in, tell you these stories, and then waiting for like the big moment, and then they're just like, and that's all, and then you get just slightly disappointed, like, I was hoping.
Well, yeah, sure. I even ask sometimes, and they're like, oh no, I don't know what happened. I left. I never checked into it. And it's like, why not?
Yeah. Well, I was reading I just read the story titled "The Man with the Medallion."
Yes.
And so, I'm reading through it, and I'm like, oh, this is interesting. This is really interesting. Wait, no. Where's it going? No, stop. No. Oh, man. They never.
Yeah.
What what's happening? You know?
Yeah, but the truth is, I mean, think about people, and I'm not talking about paranormal people, because, you know, paranormal people, something happens to them, they'll get an EMF meter and a video camera and the whole thing and go investigate. But an average person, when your family tells you a ghost story, you know, your grandfather, it's not like, well, then I got out the EMF meter and it's kind of the way these stories go. I mean, that's the way that they're told, and this is real life. I think it is, to me, it's like to make you, it also makes you think. It makes you think, well, what could have been the resolution? What could have been the causes? And one of the things I think I've learned the most out of all of these things, of doing this for all these years, is I used to think of this stuff in very kind of black and white terms, very simple. Like, ghosts were dead people. UFOs were little green men, and Bigfoot is an animal, if he exists at all. And now it's like, well, is Bigfoot really an animal, or could he be an interdimensional traveler? Or are ghosts dead people, or are they just some kind of residue, some kind of imprint? For example, I've had Lloyd Auerbach on the show, whom I'm sure you guys are familiar with, one of the smartest people on all of this stuff that I can possibly think about. He tells a story about a house where a murder kept replaying, but the problem was the murderer was not dead. He was like on death row. So are ghosts always dead people, or UFOs? You know, I used to think, little green men, kind of the Stanton Friedman approach to everything. Who is a great guest. He's been on a couple times, and just an honor to talk to him. But that's kind of that approach. But now more and more people are thinking, are they interdimensional? Are they something else? You know, are they spiritual in any way? And when it really gets weird when you think about something like Pennsylvania, where you have UFOs showing up when people see Bigfoot. Stan Gordon's done a lot of work on that. So I guess what I'm saying is that, I mean, kind of the way we're taught to look at this stuff by media and everything, it's very simple and it's straightforward. And after doing this for 11 years, I don't think it's simple or straightforward at all. I think it's real, but I don't think the answers are easy.
Right. Yeah. Well, folks, we're going to go to our first break here. You've been listening to Paratruth Radio right here on the Paratruth Radio Network. We're talking to Jim Harold about his book, The True Ghost Stories, Jim Harold's Campfire 5. We will be right back after Eric's Random Fact of the Day.
Now, Eric's Random Fact of the Day.
Did you know that naked mole rats have a high resistance to cancer tumors? According to Factslides.com, naked mole rats have a high resistance to cancer tumors because they produce an extremely high molecular mass known as hyaluronan and have ribosomes that produce extremely error-free proteins.
This was Eric's Random Fact of the Day.
All right, folks, welcome back to Paratruth Radio. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric.
And we've been talking to Jim Harold about his book, True Ghost Stories, Jim Harold's Campfire, Volume 5. And something that you had said, Jim, just before the break, is, you know, that the media plays these stories off as simply resolved, where as you said, it is not. And, you know, I'm a firm believer that mainstream media is kind of coerced. It's not It's not what people are supposed to be hearing. It's what the man, quote unquote, wants us to hear. And I'm glad that you have a show that brings even more truth. I'm glad we have a show that brings even more truth, because mainstream media is not the place to go to get more facts on these bizarre truths.
I agree with you, and I got to tell you, I think, you know, I was talking about something like In Search Of in the 70s, and it's a little bit cheesy, but I thought that, you know, if you look back with the eyes of today and the production values and the old film and all that, but the truth was, I think at least they tried to look at it somewhat seriously. And then even later, Unsolved Mysteries, which I loved.
Right,
I loved Robert Stack. Is there anybody better at that? I mean, he was tremendous. But the thing was, is that at least and it's funny, if you read about the producers of the Unsolved Mysteries, they were all very skeptical of the paranormal, but it's the shows that got the best ratings.
Right.
But nevertheless, I think they tried to approach it somewhat seriously. Whereas now, I don't think you could make shows like that, hardly. I don't think that TV would allow it. And it's interesting, it's quite funny. I'm actually looking into heading up a streaming TV effort on one of the major services in terms of getting a show on one of the major streaming services.
Okay.
Stay tuned. But it's the plan is to do it in such a way that I own it and that I control it. Because the truth is, I've been approached several times by TV people. And every time I got the same feeling that, if I got involved with them, it would essentially be doing a deal with the devil, and that they would control everything, and they would control the tenor of it, and probably it would be more sensationalistic, and be more this, and be more that. And it's like, this sounds really selfish, but I do things that I'm interested in. And I mean, I do subjects I'm not as interested in. I do a wide range because I want to serve everybody. Right. But I do the shows the way I want to do them. And there's a certain amount of people that seem to like that. And if other people don't like it, that's okay too. But I don't have to. The beauty of being an independent, and you guys in the same way, being an independent producer, you can do things the way you want to do them. And, then it's up to people to judge if they want to watch or listen. But it's great. Right. Having this outlet. Thank goodness for the internet. I hope nothing ever happens that shuts it down. Right. Sometimes I worry. But it's just such a great venue. That doesn't mean that we don't do it professionally. I mean, my goal with my shows is to make it sound like you're just listening to traditional radio, except not as many commercials. Right. But I want to sound like traditional radio. I want to have good audio quality. I want it to be solid. I want to be professional, but the content doesn't have to be dumbed down as much because you don't have those corporate overlords saying, well, if you took it down a half a notch, or your listenership would increase by 30%. I don't have to worry about that. Thank goodness. And the truth is, the more I think about it, because I've always thought, I used to think, wouldn't it be great if you get picked up for a TV show, or maybe you get, an opportunity to host a big radio show or something like that. Right. And the more I think about it, I don't really care. I'm doing shows. I have an audience. The audience is growing. And the fact is that we can talk about the subjects that interest us in some depth, rather than just kind of going for the lowest common denominator.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny that you brought up the people that don't like what you're doing. Well, without the haters, we're not doing our jobs as broadcasters if we don't have haters out there.
Right, so. And honestly, really, people have been pretty nice. Occasionally, I'll get the nasty review on iTunes or something like that, and that's okay. Hey, you put yourself out there, you've got to be willing to take some criticism. Right. So that's fine. The good thing is that, 9 out of 10 reviews are like 5 stars, and then occasionally you'll get a 1 star. Probably the truth is somewhere in the middle. I'm probably not consistently a 5 star, and I certainly don't think I'm a 1 star. So the truth is probably somewhere in the middle, but so far, I mean, the audience has been great to me, and I thank them every opportunity I get, because they allow me to do what I enjoy for a living, and that's a pretty rare gift.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, now, during our break, just a few moments ago, you had mentioned that you maybe want to share a couple stories with us, and we totally want to hear some of those stories. But we definitely want to hear the ones that are most interesting to you, some of your favorite stories.
Right.
Well, this one is not in the new book. I believe it's in the second book. And the good thing about the books, you can read them in any order, folks, so you don't have to worry about this. But this one's called The Roadhouse Saloon, and this is just off of the top of my memory. I don't have it pulled up in front of me. But this was her name is T.I., and she was from Michigan. Now, this is one that really, how I said some of the ones were real subtle? Right. This wasn't subtle at all. This actually could be an episode of The Twilight Zone. And believe it or not, it's up to you. In the words of Jack Palance, if you're old enough to remember that. But anyway, T.I. was with her friend Bob. They were in a rural area of Wisconsin. And they had gone to see a band, and it was like, past 2 o'clock in the morning. They closed the place down. I guess they knew some members of the band, and they were chatting with them. And they were coming back home, and they were about an hour from their destination. And it was dark, and it was rural. And all of a sudden, T.I. had to go to the restroom, which is never any fun in the middle of the woods. And Bob says, well, I can always pull over here, and you can go by a bush. And she said, no, thank you. Just drive fast. So anyway, they went on a little while, and I kind of out of the blue was this bar. And it was all lit up and neon signs and cars in the parking lot. And they thought, well, that's odd. It's past 2 o'clock in the morning, but let's not look a gift horse in the mouth. Let's get in there. So they stopped. T.I. went in and took care of nature's call and came back out. Bob had gotten a couple of beers. And it was funny. When they came in, the people weren't really talking, but they were kind of almost like smiling strangely and beckoning him in. And they thought that was weird, but oh well. So anyway, they're still sitting there and they have a couple of beers, and Bob mentions that there's a mural on the wall that is fairly well known by artists. He was an artist, and he was anxious to see it. And anyway, they noticed that the people in the mural, and this was an Old West motif, the people in the bar were also in the mural. So there was like kind of this big burly guy with muscles and a strapped T-shirt who was standing behind the bar. But in the mural, there was a bar, and he was there. He was dressed in Old West uniform, garb. Same with a couple guys down at the end of the bar. Then there were a couple of women. Similar placement. They were in the mural. They thought that was kind of weird. All of a sudden, there's an almost old-time jukebox, vinyl records, if anybody remembers that. And some guy puts on Let's Twist Again by Chubby Checker. He walks up to T.I., and he smiles, and T.I. said, in these really rotten brown teeth, and asked her to dance. Now, T.I. happens to walk with a cane. So she held up her cane and kind of said to the guy, I can't really dance. And he kind of left off. Now, that'll come back, that little piece of the story kind of adds to the overall weirdness for now. So anyway, they're sitting there thinking, boy, this place is just kind of weird. And they start looking at the mural more closely. And in the doors, there's like swinging doors. In the old Westerns, they would have these swinging doors. Mm. And they notice that there seemed to be two shadowy figures in the doorway. And they hadn't noticed them before. And they look at it a little longer, and it almost seems like it's like developing before their very eyes. And these kind of misty figures are coming more into focus, almost like an old Polaroid picture. They're coming more into focus, and they're more into focus. And it's a man and a woman. And the man's tall. Bob's tall. The woman's shorter. T.I.'s shorter. The woman has, in the mural, has curly hair. T.I. has curly hair. The woman has boots and a cane. T.I. has boots and a cane. All of a sudden, Bob looks at T.I., T.I. looks at Bob, and they say, let's get out of here. Apparently, they were developing into the mural. So anyway, they get ready to leave, and all of these people again, and they mentioned that they almost didn't act like they spoke English. They just kind of smiled blankly. In this case, they're like beckoning them back, like, why are you leaving? Why are you leaving? And they go. But the interesting thing, they close the door. The minute the door goes closed, the parking lot is deserted. All the lights are off on the bar. Everything neon sign like it was never open. They get the heck out. Okay, now, here's a little bit of closure for you.
Okay.
T.I.'s a lot braver than I am. If I almost got somehow trapped in an interdimensional painting, I don't think I would have gone back. But she went back. She went with a friend. And granted, she went a little earlier in the evening, 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening, a couple of nights later. And she went back and she went in. They noticed there was a jukebox. But it wasn't a vinyl jukebox, not with records. It was with CDs. No, by the way, no Chubby Checker at all can be found on a jukebox. Then there was a female bartender, a younger woman. And T.I. says, oh, I was in here the other night, very late. Where's that big, handsome, burly bartender that was here. There's nobody who works here like this. There are two bartenders. There's me and my elderly father. And with that, T.I. and her friend left. So what did T.I. and Bob run into? I don't know. But I know that it sounds just like a Twilight Zone or a Night Gallery or something like that. So that's probably the most elaborate story in 7 years of doing the programs, and that's a wild one. Now, a lot of people say, I'm not buying it, that sounds made up. That's your right. All I can say is I've spoken directly to T.I. about this twice, and both times she has seemed extremely sincere, and the details did not change one iota. Take that for what it's worth. But I believe she encountered something, and that is probably the wildest campfire story ever.
It's definitely weird. That's for sure.
That's weird. Yeah, it's not every day that happens.
That's actually the first I've heard a story like that.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that they're not all ghost stories. Some of them are like I put that in the category of head scratchers. Mm-hmm. Like ones that, like doppelgangers. I don't know if you guys have done a lot of work on doppelgangers, but there's a story in the current book, Campfire 5, where a young girl, and this was told by a friend of hers. His name's Luke from South Carolina. And there's this woman, and she lives with her mom. I mean, young lady. She's 18 years old. She was going to high school, senior in high school. And they would both get off the job and school at about the same time, around 3:30. One day the daughter would be home earlier. Next day the mom would be home. This particular day, the mom was sitting in the living room waiting for her daughter to come through the front door from school. All of a sudden she hears down the hallway her daughter's bedroom door open. Daughter storms out, says some choice curse words and says, "You are the worst mom ever. I hope that you die. I wish that I'd never met you." Something along those lines. She storms off. She slams the bedroom door. And the mom is thinking, what's up with that? I have a great relationship with my daughter. But at the same instant that door slams, the front door opens, and guess who walks in? Her daughter. And the mom's like, what's going on? And she gets up and looks out the door just to see the school bus pull away. Now, this ostensibly happened at the same time, so they couldn't be the same person.
Right.
So the person coming out of the bedroom was a doppelganger. Now, I do know Luke from South Carolina said that he didn't have any further details, but that they did shortly move out of the trailer. They just had a bad sense about the place.
Interesting. Did you know that Abraham Lincoln actually had a doppelganger?
Yes, I had heard that. Yes, I had heard that. And sometimes I believe that's considered to be a sign of doom of some type.
That's what it was believed, especially back in his time, was he saw himself dying. He saw his doppelganger dying, so he took that as an omen of death.
Yeah. And that's the thing. This stuff is really weird. You know, you get into, we just did a show on the Paranormal Podcast. I did Dave Schrader from Darkness Radio, who's fantastic. And he also does fill-in on Coast to Coast AM from time to time and does a great job on that as well. We did a show on the Mandela Effect, and I'm assuming you guys are familiar with the Mandela Effect.
Actually, yeah, I am. Yeah. And I was wanting to get him on to talk about it as well, because it's something that's really interesting. Like, and I've actually been seeing this more and more, like the Berenstain Bears. Well,
yes.
No, they're saying it's the Berenstain Bears. It's always been the Berenstain
Bears. Exactly. Right. Exactly. And the Mandela Effect was taken in from the idea that people remember Nelson Mandela dying in prison, and then all of a sudden he's alive and is the president of South Africa. I mean, he's passed since, of course. But I guess the point is that people have all of these false memories, and it's not just one person. I mean, I don't know how many times you guys, I just had it with a celebrity the other day, and I'm usually pretty up on this stuff because I love the old-time celebrities and stuff. Mm-hmm. And someone was being interviewed on a podcast. I'm like, oh, I thought she was dead, you know.
Right.
And so it's like, and then David mentioned Kirk Douglas, the great actor Kirk Douglas, and he said that, I believe what Dave says, he had a direct memory of him dying, a press conference, and all of these things. And it turned out that he's still alive. I don't think he's particularly healthy, but he's still alive.
Right.
So, I mean, yeah, it is really a really fascinating thing, and I think that I think it does hint at maybe there are parallel universes. And to be honest with you, that could explain a lot of this stuff. I mean, the thing is, one of the examples I use in the show is DNA. You know, DNA has existed since we've existed. But in 1900, you know, if you would have said, mentioned DNA and explained to people the concept, we thought, oh, you're crazy. We can't see it. Well, that's some kind of voodoo.
Right.
Well, the fact is that it existed. They just didn't have the tools and the techniques to find. Maybe a lot of this stuff is explicable scientifically, but it's the science. I think it may have been Arthur C. Clarke or somebody that said this. It might be the science of the 25th century.
Yeah. And being in the paranormal for as long as you have, as long as we have, it's, you know, we've had a lot of people ask, or we ask them, you know, do you think there's ever going to be a time that we have true answers? And some say yes, some say, you know, no, there's no way that we're going to do this. But the more we advance in scientific technology, it's possible. But I mean, in the long run, we're talking about things beyond our normal understanding. So will we all ever have a full understanding? I don't think so. But that's just my personal opinion.
I actually agree with you, but I think we might come to some understandings.
Right.
You know, maybe there'll be something that'll give a little more of a hint of life after death, which I'm an absolute believer in. Maybe we'll have a glimpse here and a glimpse there. I certainly think, you know, I'm 47, so I don't think in my life, even if I live to the, you know, either 90 years old, you know, I hope that's the case, but even if I live that long, I don't think in my lifetime that all of this will be solved. Might we have a few more clues? Might we have some more information? Maybe. Now, I've talked to other people like Lloyd Auerbach. I mentioned him again. But he thinks that we're going to have a lot of answers in the next several years based on some of the work that's being done. So I guess, you know, everybody has a right to their opinion, but I know people have been asking these questions since the dawn of time, and they've not gotten a lot of really good answers. I'm not sure that in the next 40 years that's going to change. But, of course, you know, if you watched 60 Minutes this last week, artificial intelligence is making some great strides. Maybe that'll be another thing that could be brought to bear to try to figure all this out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's interesting, though, because, like, even if we do get more clues over the next 20, 30, 40 years, and even though those clues may support certain theories that we've already had and help to support help support other evidence that we have as well, I think there's plenty of people in this world who will just simply deny any facts that are put on the table. And so we still end up in the same boat that we are today, because we have evidence of what would be life after death, and yet people just, you know, they're not as willing or quick to hold on to it and accept it.
I agree.
And so, you know, who knows? It could be exactly the way it is now, 40 years from now, just with more evidence and, you know,
right.
Different. I don't know, but
well, you know, thank goodness for science. We couldn't do what we're doing right now. I appreciate science, but I think that, you know, I think most believers, whether it's a religion or it's this sort of thing, the paranormal, I think most of us are willing to say, you know, there is a lot of faith to this. There is a lot of belief involved. I mean, we don't have absolute proof. There are certainly things like NDE studies and work of Sam Parnia and different people that support the idea, but I don't think we have stone cold proof that there's life after death. I mean, I think we certainly have a lot of indications. We have some evidence, but I think that believers, for the most part, are willing to say, you know, we don't know for sure. We believe it. Right. Now, the, quote, science people speak in absolutes. You know, it's like, oh, there's no way this can be true. This is, right. But the thing that I laugh about is if you look over history, the amount of things that, quote, mainstream science said wasn't possible, couldn't be, you know, everything from the earth being flat, you know, and on. I mean, science has again, done great things. Thank goodness for science. I mean, I was just reading the other day, the average life expectancy to someone born in 1900 was 50 years old.
Right.
So hats off to science. But I do think that people who have the hardcore science point of view, I think that in many ways, and I just did a great interview with, and not because of me, because of him, by a guy named Mark Mirabello about this. I think science is never willing to say, oh, you know, we're not 100% sure. There's a possibility. We know the way it should be and the way it is, and that's the way it is, and you people are crazy. You know, and I'm not saying all scientists are like that. I'm saying a lot of them are like that. Mm-hmm. And hopefully there can be more of a meeting of minds as we go down the path, because I think both sides could learn something from the other.
Well, and I actually think that is coming more and more true now, because there are scientists who are saying there is scientific proof that there is a God or higher power that is responsible for this, compared to it was the Big Bang and that was the end of it. So it's kind of interesting to see that actual scientists are saying this is what's happening now. We are coming to the understanding that there is more to it than just the Big Bang Theory.
Yeah, absolutely. And my question about the Big Bang Theory, okay, there was a Big Bang. Who caused it?
Right.
Exactly.
Exactly. Okay, I'm perfectly willing to believe there was a Big Bang. Fine. Who caused it?
Well, and the big thing, like the big argument, I think, is scientists are always saying, oh, the Big Bang Theory, the Big Bang started from absolutely nothing. Well, if there was absolutely nothing, then how can something possibly have just exploded into everything? You know? Right. So it's flawed. It's flawed.
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, somebody made that Big Bang, and might have been God. So
right.
Might have been.
Good chance.
The one thing that we stride on our particular show is Eric comes from a strictly Christian view, where I come from more of a mainstream view on a lot of this stuff. And sometimes we butt heads, sometimes we completely 100% agree, and it's fun to see what comes of it. And we always leave it up to our listeners. Be like,
right.
We've laid it out for you. We let you guys decide what you believe is true.
Yeah, I feel the same way. People will say, Jim, you're so even-handed, and, even if something's wild, you don't criticize the person or those things. And the truth is, I might ask a question, like something I often do if like a skeptical note hits me, I might say, well, the skeptic might say this. What would you say to that? Not to insult the person or be nasty, because the truth is, and actually I was on Coast to Coast AM a couple of weeks ago with George Norrie, and we were talking about hosting something and whether you believe in it or not. And George said, and I thought this was smart, he said, it's not whether I believe. People ask me if I believe. It doesn't matter if I believe. It's if they believe. It's really up to them. And similarly, I don't put it quite that way, but my feeling is that I definitely have my opinions about different things. And I've shared those from time to time, but that doesn't mean that I shouldn't present somebody who thinks the absolute opposite. Because again, the idea is to put the information out there and let the listener decide. For example, I've had Dr. Michael Shermer, on the show, who is, other than James Randi, probably the foremost skeptic that there is. And actually, he was very nice. I disagree with him, but he was very nice, and he made his case, and people could listen to it and understand. The interesting thing about him, and I'm guessing you guys may have seen this, that a year or two ago, he published in Scientific American the details of his own paranormal experience. And you could tell at the end he was kind of struggling with how to end it, because he was kind of like, well, the only conclusion I came to, and I'm paraphrasing from memory, so I hope I'm not misquoting you, Dr. Shermer, but something like, well, of course, the only explanation for this is that it's paranormal. But then again, it can't be paranormal. Are you familiar with the one I'm talking about at his wedding in the radio? Are you familiar with the story?
I actually haven't seen the article, so no.
Look up Dr. Michael Shermer, Scientific American. I thought was one of the neatest things. The question I asked him is, I said, and this is not really including my campfire stories, but in general, I might be skeptical of over 90% of specific claims, particularly things like UFOs these days. UFOs could be drones, it could be planes. I tend to pull out of stock into the reports from pilots and people who know what these things look like. Those are the ones that really fascinate me. So, and in fact, I was doing a video show with clips for years and largely stopped doing it because the clips are so poor now. And could be drones, could be anything. It's kind of like, what is the point of this? Right. But anyway, the point is, what I said to him is, we could agree in 97% of the cases maybe that there's an explanation, or somebody is good-natured and just mistaken, or maybe somebody wants to think that it's Aunt Millie, or maybe unfortunately there are a few of those hoaxers out there. We know they're there. We hate to say it, but does exist. However, what about the few percent that I can't explain, you can't explain, science can't explain? And he said, we know about that, but we just put those up on the shelf. And I kind of thought, wait a minute. Hold up here. You're telling me there's a small percentage you can't explain, but you just put them on a shelf. And he's like, yes. And it's like, no, let's take those off the shelf. Let's look at those cases. So that was fun.
You know what's interesting? Before we go to our next break here, I wish somebody could tell me, when it comes to the newer UFO videos and photos that come out over the last few weeks and months, why is it that even though video technology and photo technology is getting better, these UFO photos and videos are getting worse and worse? They're so gritty.
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, when people are shooting with I have in my hand the new iPhone 7 Plus, which has probably the best camera on a smartphone. It's still not going to be very good at nighttime video photography. Even the good ones aren't that good at something like that. They're great if you have a lot of sunlight and, those kind of things. And even with the vaunted iPhone 7 Plus camera, it has a 2x optical zoom, which is not that great. Now, if somebody had video, Mark V DSLRs and we're out taking pictures, but the average person's taking pictures is using a relatively low quality camera, even if they're high quality for snapshots and things. Right. For hardcore video shooting, nighttime is hard to shoot. And you need, when you see you're watching a football game and you see a picture of the moon or something, probably using a camera with a $30,000 lens on it. So I think that's the problem. Right. And plus, people don't know how to shoot. My wife, I'm arguing with her all the time. Hold the phone in landscape. Hold the phone in landscape. No, you don't hold it that way. It's like, no, I went to school for this. Hold it in landscape.
Unfortunately, that argument will never be won. I hate to tell you that.
No, I just drives me nuts.
All right, folks, we're going to go to our second and last break of the evening. We are talking to Jim Harold, who wrote the book True Ghost Stories, Jim Harold's Campfire 5. We will be right back after Justin's Paranormal Headlines.
And now, Paratruth Radio's Paranormal Headlines.
How's it going, Parafans? Justin here with your paranormal headlines, and these headlines are from altereddimensions.net. Video from Thailand captures dark apparition exiting woman's body just moments after death. Video captured an inexplicably ghostly apparition in Lopburi, Thailand, following a traffic accident involving a passenger vehicle striking a motorcycle carrying two people. A woman on the motorbike was knocked off of the bike when the automobile slammed into it, knocking her into a power pole. Sadly, the woman was killed instantly. A video of the aftermath shows the woman laying on the ground as a black orb visibly emerges from her chest. A passenger leaps from the car and runs toward the ghostly figure, wildly waving his hands. The apparition hovers above the body for several seconds, then vanishes. Missing woman accidentally joins search party looking for herself. The story began on Saturday, August 25th, 2012, after a group that was traveling through Iceland on a tour bus stopped near a volcanic canyon for a quick view. When the bus reloaded, passengers reported one of the women, described as Asian, about 5'2", wearing dark clothing, was missing. A search was mounted in the vicinity of Eldia Canyon, which continued throughout the weekend with no sign of the woman found. Then on August 26, 2012, authorities revealed the woman had been found noting oddly that she never realized she had been missing. It was first reported that the woman stepped off the bus and never returned. In fact, she had simply changed clothes before getting back on the bus. Speaking little English, when she heard about the missing woman on the bus, she willingly joined the search party and set out with 50 others to find, well, herself. After about a day, just as the Coast Guard was readying to deploy a helicopter and expand the search, she realized that the missing woman's description eerily fit her own. When she began to suspect she very well could be the missing person everyone was looking for, she notified the police that she was safe and sound. The search was called off 2 hours later. And this has been Justin with your Paranormal Headlines.
This was a segment of Paratruth Radio's Paranormal Headlines.
What's up, folks? Welcome back to Paratruth Radio. My name is Eric.
And I'm Justin.
And we are talking to Jim Harold, the author of True Ghost Stories, Jim Harold's Campfire 5. Now, Jim, we are at the end of the show here, and so what we would like to do is give you another moment here to tell people where they can catch you, your shows, where they can find your book, and put anything else out that you'd like to give out.
I would definitely like to do that. Well, thank you both for the opportunity to come on the show. I really appreciate it. Love talking with new people, both hosts and audiences, so thank you for that. They can find all of my podcasts at jimharold.com. That's JIMHAROLD.com. Also, I'm on iTunes, I'm on Spotify, I'm on iHeartRadio, I'm on Stitcher, I'm on Google Play, and all of the various podcast apps out there. The two podcasts you'll look for, the Paranormal Podcast and Jim Harold's Campfire. And you can find all of the books over at Amazon.com or the Amazon in your country. And it's simply True Ghost Stories, Jim Harold's Campfire. It should bring them all up. And each book is a full-length book, over 200 pages. And each one is only $2.99 on the Kindle. And then we also have a paperback Dead Tree edition if you're low-tech and want to have a physical copy. And you could start in any order. So you can start with book 1 and go through 5, start 5, go backwards. The important thing is not the order that you read them and buy them. The important thing is that you do buy them. So,
and I think
they're a lot of fun I think they're a lot of fun for Halloween, particularly if you're going to have parties and those kind of things. What I like is the idea, and people tell me that they've done this, is they get the book and they read 1 or 2 stories, and then somebody says, well, that reminds me of the story that I had, and then somebody else, and all of a sudden you put the book down and you started a whole conversation. So I think it's a great conversation story for campfires around this time of year and for Halloween.
And that's when they should be like, you should call Jim Harold.
Exactly. It's a virtuous circle.
All right, Jim, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a blast. I know that you got a really busy schedule, so we will let you go for now, and maybe somewhere down the road we'll have you on again.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys, and happy Halloween.
Same to you.
See ya.
All right, folks. That was Jim Harold, and he's got the Paranormal Podcast. He's got Jim Harold's Campfire Stories. Both are podcasts, and then he has his books, The True Ghost Stories, Jim Harold's Campfire 1 through 5. Great guy. Definitely had a good time talking to him, and what better way to talk to somebody than a fellow Clevelander?
And what better way to initiate the Halloween season than to talk about some ghost stories?
Right, yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, if you guys love ghost stories, which I know a lot of our listeners do, check out True Ghost Stories, the entire series, not just his newest one, but all of them. He actually also has a adult coloring book, True Campfire Story coloring book out there as well. So I was like, gosh, I would love to buy it, but right now I'm strapped for cash. It's awesome that he came up with something for adults, and I'm sure the kids will grab it and just start scribbling in it as well. But check out jimharold.com as well. That's where you'll find all of his stuff as well, and I'll post the link in the comments for you guys, in the show notes rather. One thing that I wanted to touch base on before we head out was we had a comment on one of our YouTube videos, actually the Zozo video, and this is from Sarah. I'm sorry if I mispronounced your last name, Sarah. Sarah Ochoa. I'm sorry. Do you guys think that Jimmy Page of Led Zeppelin got Zoso, which was on their cover, from the Zozo Demon? What are your thoughts on that?
That's a good question. I don't know. I mean, honestly, we could probably do some research and find out. Now, we know Zozo is an ancient term that was representative of that particular demon. I don't recall actually the word Zozo coming up elsewhere, but let's see.
Well, it's the way it's spelled on the label was Zoso, not Zozo.
Zoso. Okay.
Yeah. So, and we've had people tell us when we were coming out with that episode, they were saying, well, yeah, Zoso is on the Led Zeppelin album, and it's connected to this, it's connected to that. Is it truly, or is it just what they believe? I don't know. Zoso compared to Zozo, there is a little bit of a different spelling there, but it could be linked to the same thing as well.
Well, according to Urban Dictionary, and I'm just throwing this out there, Zoso is not actually a word, but more so a symbol, and it's the original symbol that was used by Cardano in 1557, which he used as the magical sigil for Saturn, which is the planet that rules Capricorn.
Okay.
Jimmy Page's sign. So it's an occult symbol, the word Zoso. It's kind of similar to the symbol Om in Hinduism. So Om, as we all know that Om isn't actually right. It is a sound. It's a vibration that creates, according to Hinduism, it's the vibration that created everything. It's what created life, and is in essence life itself. But it's actually a symbol. That Om is actually a symbol, the word for the symbol, just as Zoso is a word for a symbol. So who knows? I mean, in this case, I would say that probably they're not the same thing by any means, although, we're talking about occult symbols and,
Right. I was going to say,
magical symbols.
Zozo used Zoso as his symbol? Possibly. But was that Jimmy Page's original thought when he chose that? I honestly don't think so. I honestly think that was just creative thinking that he wanted to use that over, I want to use this to summon this demon or whatever some people believe. But is there a link? Possibly, I think. But I don't think in Jimmy Page's particular case he was using that to link to the Zozo demon.
No, I think what he's doing is taking a word that represented his sign, Capricorn, and using it in that sense, But again, we don't know unless we were actually able to talk to Jimmy Page. So
Jimmy Page, give us a call. So, yeah, folks, that is the end of the show today. As I said, loved talking to Jim Harold. Awesome guy. Next week, we're going to have another Jim on with us, hopefully. Jim McKinney from Paranormal Supernatural Activity Radio, and he's going to come on and talk to us about Black-Eyed Children. I think we might have touched base on Black-Eyed Children a little bit in a previous episode, but we're going to get a little more in depth with it this time, because there are cases going on even, to this day, where black-eyed children are showing up on people's doors as it's getting closer to the Halloween, that scare factor even comes even further into effect. And what better time to talk about this creepy stuff other than the month of Halloween? So we're going to talk about that. And our Halloween episode, we're actually going to have on somebody from the Ohio State Reformatory, which most of you in the paranormal interest know. Ohio Reformatory is well known for being haunted. It was used in a couple of movies as well. So it'll be interesting to see the mindset of people that actually work there as to what's going on there. So anything that you have announcement-wise? Nothing so far?
No, nothing so far. You know what? I will bring this up. This is just a little a teaser. So you guys know that we've gone through a couple of different logos for Paratruth Radio. For those of you who've been around with us for the last couple of years, since Paratruth has begun. And so there is yet another logo in the works. And it's not particularly or strictly for Paratruth Radio itself, but it's a spin-off, if you will. It's not for radio, but it's for the production side of Paratruth Radio. So I think it's really cool. I'm actually about to show Justin this particular image of what I got so far. But soon enough, we're going to be revealing that to you guys, and then probably end up getting T-shirts made up, hats, and other accessories with the logos. So we will probably be putting those out for both giving them away for people who want to try to win some of these products, but we'll also be selling them as well for those of you who are pretty cool diehard fans. And if you're not diehard fans, that's okay. Just be fans and buy our stuff. So I just wanted to throw that out. I give you guys a little something to kind of look forward to beside just episodes. But yeah.
Well, and I'll give you guys a hint. If you haven't seen the paramixology videos, it's linked to that. So if you haven't watched the paramixology videos, which shame on you if you have not watched the paramixology videos, check those out and you'll see what we're talking about as far as the production company for more of the video and audio side of it. So check that out. Check out all of our pages: Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Google+, as well as paratruthradio.com. And that is all.
iHeart.
Oh, yeah. iHeartRadio. How can I forget iHeartRadio? We celebrated so much about iHeartRadio.
I don't know, man.
So, check all those out, guys. If you're on YouTube, make sure you subscribe so that way you're updated every week as to a new episode that is up and running. If you are on Spreaker or on iHeartRadio, make sure you follow us on those as well, because it will update you when a new show is live and active. Folks, that is all we have for tonight. Until next week, where you will see us same time, same channel. My name is Justin.
And I'm Eric. Peace.
If you enjoyed this episode of Paratruth Radio and you would like to listen to it again, or are interested in listening to any of our past episodes, then you can listen to them on HD at our website, paratruthradio.com.
And you can also find us at Stitcher, Blueberry, TuneIn, iTunes, Spreaker, and YouTube.
And of course, like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter for brand new updates of our show every day.